Dear Ruth and Pauline, this has to be a hurried note to both of you. Sorry I haven't had time to write separate letters. I'm wondering how you both are. Excited, I'm sure, about the future, and at the same time a bit scared or reluctant to leave the world you know and enter another one. I can understand that, but I can also assure you that it is a wonderful world. It's really not as confined as you might think. I have to go because we have another group of people arriving. I look forward to connecting with you soon. Welcome to Extraordinary Stories Podcast. Hi, how are you? Are you well? Are you good? I am. What I wanted to do was call the episode, I wanted to call it What the Fuck. But those of you who've been on the journey with me for a while, you may remember there was a time where iTunes took me down. They took my podcast away entirely. Extraordinary Stories Podcast just did not exist for a period in time. And the reason was I was a bit sweary in some of my titles. So I had an episode called Fake Fucking Fuckers, and iTunes did not like this. They were not into that. So I had to clean up my act and retitle everything. So I would love to call this episode What the Fuck, but there's not really much point because I've been beaten down by the man. I've been beaten down by iTunes. They won't allow it. Okay, so I'm going to do my quick shout outs. They go to Jenny Foxcroft. Hey Jenny, how are you? Katie Morris. Katie, hello. Stay strong. And Joan Lee Seaga. Quite the surname, but I think I got it right. I hope that I did. Right, okay, let's get into it. Let's get ready for a mind-bending story. Are you ready for the story of Pauline Dakin? Okay, let's go. Okay, where are we for this story? Well, we're in 1970s and we're in Canada. And we're going to talk about the Dakin family. They're not an ordinary family, let me assure you. So the family makeup is this. We have Mother Ruth, Father Warren, daughter Pauline, and son Ted. Essentially, this is really Pauline's story, the daughter. It's really her story that I'll be telling here. But those are the four members of the family. So let's talk about Ruth, the mum. Well, she was a hard-working woman. She did everything in her power to keep her family unit as strong as it could be. She always had time for her kids, and she did what she could to provide for them. Father Warren, he was a successful businessman. He had a really good job, it was I think it was in banking development was what he worked in. So there was good money coming in to the house. But Warren, unfortunately, had issues also with alcohol. Although the kids, when they were young, they never really knew this, he was an alcoholic. And Ruth did her very, very best to keep this from the kids. She did everything that she could to try and protect them from his alcoholism. So they lived in Vancouver. And people would say there's something unusual about the Dakin family. Why did people say this? Well, it's because they were secretive. They kept themselves to themselves in a community where everybody knew each other. Everyone knew their neighbours and each other's business, but not the Dakin family. They like to just keep everything between themselves and their house. I'm pretty sure there were a few people who were desperate to know what was actually going on in the Dakin family, and they could only probably guess from the outside. It's something I quite like to do with people. I quite like to look and try and work out what the hell's going on. I have to tell you this because it's just, it's slightly mortifying, but it's also, this is just who I am, and I can't change it. So, my partner comes home the other night, and he comes into the living room, and I'm standing with a glass, like old school, standing with a glass pressed to my ear against the wall, trying to hear my neighbours on the other side, because they were having a massive argument, and I wanted to know what the massive argument was about. And I know that's terrible. I know that you should probably just be like, live and let live, let people fight if they want to fight, but I really needed to know what the argument was about. But I then worked out that actually, if I came upstairs to actually the bit where I podcast from, so I've got like a table in my spare room where I sit down to do the podcast, I worked out that actually if you go to that wall, you can hear much more of what's going on in the house. So I stood there for about 20 minutes with this glass pressed against my ear. I heard it all. It's really, there's a whole mother, used to be, I think there were drug issues. She's got 2 sons. One of them's moved out because he can't live with her anymore. The other son's still living there, but apparently he's not got a job. Oh, I heard it all. And my partner was like, "Manny, this is ridiculous now. You're just like, stop getting obsessed with other people's lives." And I was like, "But I know, but I can't stop that. Maybe I'm just a nosy bastard. Maybe I just need to know too much about people." But I just was like, no, I need to get a sense of what I think's going on in that house, because then once I've got the picture of it and I'm clear about it, I can be like, right, I know how to assess this situation. I know how to feel about it. Okay, right, well, anyway, that was a total left field sidetrack there, sorry. So, Pauline is the youngest in the family. She is the daughter of the family, and she would say to her brother, Ted, "What do you think is wrong with our family? Why are we so weird? Why do people consider us to be odd?" And really it came from the fact that they didn't talk to a lot of other families. Pauline says that she remembers being 5 years old, and she came home one day to find her mother throwing everything out of the fridge, every bit of food. She says even ketchup and mustard were being put in the bin. And when she asked her mum what was happening, Ruth replied, "It's all gone bad, and it all needs to be thrown out." And Pauline, although she was young, thought, well, I don't think ketchup or mustard go bad, so that's a bit odd. The family would only add to their strangeness by doing this. Disappearing. They would just up and vanish from where they lived and move to another bit of Canada without any warning and without any announcement. In the middle of the night, they would pack up their belongings into a car and vanish, and they would just be gone. So they'd get to a new area, they'd settle, they'd be there for a few weeks, the kids would be enrolled in a new school, and then before you know it, it was time again to just disappear. Middle of the night, out of there. And when the kids asked their parents, why is this happening? The parents just kept saying to them, it's a holiday. We're just going on a holiday. That's what we're doing. Now, even at a young age, they were not sure this was a holiday. They were like, why are we taking all of our belongings with us then, if it's a holiday? This doesn't make any sense. Because actually, we're not coming back to where we lived. We know that we're moving somewhere else. We know that we're going to go to another town. We know we're going to go to another city. We know we're going somewhere else. And we're never coming back to where we were. Why? So the pattern continues. They just keep continuing to move all the time. A couple of months in one place and then onwards to somewhere else. And I find this really sad, but Pauline says, as a child, she learned not to develop relationships with any friends or any school kids or any neighbours or anyone because she'd become used to the fact that she would be uprooted out of nowhere, and there was no point in trying to make a friend at school because she knew at age 6, age 7, that friendship, it was never going to go anywhere because actually the family would move on. So while all of this disruption is going on, Warren's drinking is getting worse, and he now starts to become violent towards Ruth, who, as the mother of the family, thinks, no way am I letting you be a violent alcoholic to me and potentially to her kids, and so she leaves him. She takes Pauline and her brother on another, what she calls, holiday, and they go to Winnipeg. It's when they're there that she says to them, we're never going back to the place where your father is. We're never going back there. So the kids want to know. They have to know. Why are they not seeing their father? And Pauline says whenever she asked this question of her mother, there was just never a good explanation. Ruth would say, I'm sorry, I can't tell you. When you're older, I will tell you then. Okay, so now they're a family of 3. So we've got Ruth, the mother, we've got Pauline, and we've got Ted. And this constant moving of location doesn't really stop. By the time Pauline was 11, she had attended 6 different schools. And it's really horrible, but at this young age, she starts going into like depression, anxiety, because she's just really unsettled in her life. She doesn't know where she's at. She just keeps moving from school to school and place to place, and her mother will never give her an answer about why those moves are happening. Below the surface, Pauline, she was confused. She was anxious, she was falling into depression, and she says, I knew something bad was happening. I didn't know what it was, but there was always a sense of something dire that was unspoken. So Ruth takes them away from their father. Their father, Warren, was no longer a part of the kid's life. So now another man is about to come in to the story. He's about to come into the Dakin family in a big way. The man is a church minister called Stan Sears. Stan Sears had been a family friend of the Dakins for years. He had known Ruth, he had known Warren, and he knew the kids. Ruth was religious and she liked to attend church often. She had quite a close relationship with Stan. Stan also ran a group for people who had dealt with alcoholic partners or alcoholic family members, a support group. Ruth was a part of this. So they really had a really nice relationship. They got on really, really well. Now Stan had his own family. He had a wife and a daughter. Ruth at one point actually took on the job of church secretary to the church where Stan was working. Ruth explained to Stan that the kid's dad had been an alcoholic and this is what they'd gone through as a family. They had constantly moved. They had to go from one place to the next. So this is where the story is going to get a little more strange. Ruth uprooted the family again several times. But by now the kids are 14, 15. Pauline is 14 years old at this point. So they keep moving to new parts of Canada. But each time that they move, Stan also moves with them. He brings his family to wherever they move to. So if they go from the east coast to the west coast of Canada, Stan's there. He sets up life in the new town wherever they go. So if we just stop and look at it for a second, Pauline says, yeah, it was strange. Whatever was going on, Stan was very much a part of it, and she knew that from a young age. So we've got the family unit that is Ruth, her two kids, and they're moving from place to place. Stan's family are following them wherever they go. Now on one of the moves, they go to New Brunswick, and they start to finally settle in New Brunswick. It's the place that they live in for the longest. They can actually start to lay down some roots a good few years in New Brunswick. Now it's 1988 by this point, and Pauline, well, she's an adult. She had gone to university, she had studied journalism, and she's working on a local newspaper. And one day she gets a telephone call from her mother, and it comes with a really unexpected proposal. Quite settled in her life, her mother says, okay, I'm ready to explain all of the strange things that have happened throughout your life. Pauline is ready to hear this information. She wants to know. So her mother says, meet me at this motel. She gives her the address and they agree a time to meet. And Pauline is kind of thinking, okay, what the hell is happening? But also, I'm ready to hear this. So she goes to the motel at the agreed time. And when she gets there, her mother is quite agitated. They're standing outside of the motel, standing on the street. And she asks her mum if she's okay. And her mother only nods. She doesn't respond verbally, she just nods. What she does next is so confusing for Pauline. Ruth goes into her bag and she produces an envelope and she hands it to Pauline. The envelope is empty. Pauline is very confused. Why has her mother given her this empty envelope? She doesn't know. A minute later, her mum takes out a piece of paper, and the piece of paper says, "Don't say anything. Take your jewellery off. Put it in the envelope. I'll explain. Just don't talk." Pauline says it was just the most bizarre thing. She thought, who are you? What are you doing? But she did as her mother asked. So they go into the motel. Ruth takes Pauline up to her room, thinking, okay, finally, she's going to explain the weird experience outside with the jewellery, why as a child we had to all keep moving, and I'll finally have an answer. Pauline thinks it's just going to be her and her mum in the room. But when they get there, Stan, the minister, is inside the room. Once inside, Pauline sits down, and both Ruth and Stan begin to give her the truth. The answers to all of the questions that she's been asking. They explain to her that Warren, her father, was heavily involved in organised crime. And for the past 16 years, that's why the family had to keep moving, because they were on the run from the mafia. Warren was in deep. He was a wanted man. And that's why they had to change location so often. In this moment, Ruth explains that asking for the jewellery in the envelope and passing of the note is because she couldn't be sure what had or hadn't been bugged. She thought the jewellery might have been bugged, so she felt it was safer that her daughter take it off and put it in an envelope. Pauline says of this moment, it was unbelievable. I remember a feeling of terror coming over me, that this might be something we could never escape. She was devastated at this point. She was confused. Her father, who she hadn't seen since she was 6 years old, all of a sudden she finds out he's a part of the mafia, and that's why we had to get away from him. Right, so I got to this point in the story, and I thought, okay, if Warren the dad is miles away and not involved with his family, then why would they still be any kind of target? Why would they assume that they were being bugged? Why would they think they were being listened to? They haven't seen him in years. They don't even really know where he is. But then this gets revealed to Pauline, and it only adds another bizarre twist. Stan, as I told you, was a minister, and he had offered counselling at his church. Now it turns out that one of the people that Stan had counselled years before was a mafia boss. A man who'd been involved with the mafia at a really high level, but wanted out. And he'd come to his minister for advice and for help. So when the mafia discovered this man had been to see his local minister. He'd confessed all of his crimes. That man was shot dead. However, the mafia were not satisfied with that death. They wanted Stan too. They felt that the minister now knew the secrets that were a real danger to them. So, he could go to the police at any point, and they just couldn't let that happen. So they were going to try and take Stan out. Okay, so now we know where Stan sits in all of this. We know why he's on the move, because he once had a mafia boss confess things to him. That's why he has to keep moving his family. But why did Ruth have to keep moving all the time? Well, the mafia had been keeping a pretty close eye on Stan, and the fact that he had a new church secretary. Stan explained that to Pauline, that it had all started after this counselling session. And when the mob discovered that the man had broken his code of silence, he'd broken the mob rules, and then they would want to come after Stan. Stan told them that when Ruth, the ex-wife of a mafia man, Warren, had started working as a secretary at Stan's church, she too had become a target. Pauline is then told this. Each member of her family, her mother, and her brother, they have a special person dedicated to watching them 24 hours a day. At a distance, obviously, but they're being watched every day. And they have been for years. Ooh, I find that creepy. Creepy. The same goes for Stan's family, all being watched. But were the people watching them a danger? No. They were there for protection. So in this motel room, Pauline is receiving all of this information. Her fucking brain is exploding because she's hearing all of this for the very first time in her life. And her mum explains to her that there had been over 15 attempts to kill the entire family through poison or assassination, and that the people watching were there to step in and avoid the family's deaths. The police had known the Dakins for years. They had known the family situation. They knew Stan. So they kept an eye on all of these people that the mafia were trying to get to. I mean, can you imagine hearing that information? Can you imagine sitting in a hotel room with your mum and random Stan, hiya Stan, and being like, I'm sorry, what do you mean we're wrapped up in the mafia? What do you mean a person has been watching me every day of my life since I was a child? It's just mind-blowing. It's like, what the hell? What the actual hell? Pauline says, I was sick with fear and sadness, and it just felt like life was shattering around me. So now Stan introduces to Pauline something called the Weird World. Okay, what is that? Well, it's a set of communities that exist throughout the world, and there's a lot of them in Canada, and they're basically a place to go and hide if you've ever been involved in anything mafia related. The Weird World is a safe place to hide. It's somewhere that you can go and be part of a community, but you're hidden from any danger. You're hidden from the mafia at this point. Essentially, you kind of disappear in a way. You go into this community and you can't be traced, you can't be tracked. So Stan is already living in one of these communities in the Weird World. Now, he starts to tell Pauline that actually the Weird World it's set up by the government. He says the Canadian government have set these places up, and they're very much in the know of what these communities need to be. They need to be safe. They need to be a place where people who have mafia in their family can go and hide and not feel all the time like they're under constant threat. So Stan lives there, but Stan's wife had decided she didn't want anything to do with it. She didn't want to be a part of it. So she had left Stan. So Stan's living on his own in this community. Stan now says, Pauline, here is the thing. I'm going to put your mum into the Weird World. I'm going to put her into a community where she can be safe. And I think it would be a good idea if you also went in to one of these communities. And Pauline says, no way. No. Doesn't want to do it. Not interested at all in being a part of that. She just doesn't want it. She's like, I'm not going in to some weird community that I don't know anything about. Because this is the first she's ever heard any mafia, any being watched, any of that shit. She's never heard it before. And he's saying, come on, let's go and live in a weird world. Let me protect you. And she says, no, not interested. But our mother Ruth, following Stan's orders, goes and lives in one of these communities. So Pauline goes back to her life and she tries to just go about her daily life. She's working for a local newspaper. She's a freelance journalist, reporting here, reporting there. All the time, she's looking over her shoulder. She's always wondering who might be following her, who might be watching what she's doing. She has a boyfriend at the time who she's very much in love with, but their relationship begins to fall apart because she's hiding this secret. She's not told anyone that her family were involved with the mafia. She's not said a word to anyone. And she's now constantly anxious because she thinks someone's watching me, or I could be poisoned or killed at any moment. So she's on high alert all the time. She splits up with the boyfriend that she's living with and she goes back to her mum. Her mum invites Stan over and Pauline says, I'm really scared. And they say, okay, we understand that the only way to deal with it is to come and live in the weird world. That's the only way that you can possibly be protected, is if you choose to come now and live in one of these communities. That's the only way that we can protect you. Otherwise, you're out there and you're always going to be looking over your shoulder. But in the weird world, it's safe. Okay, the government are all over this. They know how to protect you. They're watching everything all the time. The mafia will not get to you in this community. And Pauline, at this point, although she's rational, and although she's a very clever woman, she's so broken down by the idea that she's being constantly watched that she agrees this might be the best thing for her to do. So Stan starts showing her pictures of cottages and houses that she might live in. He starts showing her pictures of horses, and he's like, come to this place and live, you'll have a lovely life, it'll be fantastic. There's work for you here in this, I'll get you a job in this community. And she's so sort of frightened that she goes, yeah, okay, I'll do it. I'll just come and live in this place. She says at one point actually what she wanted to do was just run away from the whole thing. She wanted to just actually go to Australia. She thought, maybe I could just get a flight, get out of here, go and live in Australia and start again. But the fear that she was being tracked, the fear that she was being watched was so ingrained into her now that she thought, what's the point in going to somewhere like Australia? Because I'll just be followed when I'm there, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life being followed. So I'd be as well living in one of these communities where at least the government are on it, and at least it's safe, and at least her mother is nearby. And also Stan, although he doesn't live in the community she's going to go into, Stan is present. Stan is there. He can at least try to help anything that might go wrong, or help Pauline in any way. So Pauline moves into the weird world. She moves into a cottage. She's living on her own. She's fine. She's quite happy. She's getting along with her life. And she's spending time with her mother and with Stan. And they start to reveal other things to her, which come as great surprises. They start to talk to her about doubles. And she's like, sorry, what? I don't know what that means. And they say, well, you're an adult now, so we can tell you the truth. There's a lot of people in your life who you think you know, but actually they're a double of someone else, because that real person's in hiding somewhere. And she's like, what? What the fuck? Explain it to me again. So they use her brother's wedding as an example, and they say, do you remember when you went to the wedding and your dad was there? That's the first time Pauline had seen her dad in years. Years and years and years. She hadn't seen him, I don't think, since she was about 6. Do you remember seeing your dad? And she says, yeah. Stan and her mother Ruth say, that wasn't your dad. That was a double. That was someone who was made to look like your dad, because your dad's actually secretly in hiding. And she's like, what the fuck are you talking about? And they say, yeah, do you remember that time that you saw Aunt Miriam when you were 16? And she says, yeah. And they say, well, no, it wasn't Aunt Miriam. That was a double of Aunt Miriam, because she's actually in hiding. So by this point, Pauline is beginning to think, oh my god, every fucking person in my family is connected to the mafia, and everyone is a double. There is no real person there. You can imagine, right? And take the leap with me here. Take the leap with me. She's looking at her own mother and thinking, are you actually my mother? Or are you a double? This guy Stan? Is he the guy I've known since I was a child? Or is this someone pretending to be Stan because actually the real people are in hiding? What is going on? I mean, her head must just be exploding at this point. Now her head is exploding, but Pauline is also feeling something else. She's beginning to have some doubts. She keeps going over the story in her head. She keeps thinking about her dad when she was young. She gets a niggle. She gets a weird, odd feeling. And I know I go on about it a hell of a lot. I know I talk about it all the time. But when you get that niggle, be it in your body, be it in your mind, it's your system, it's your internal system telling you something's not right. Something's just not right. Okay, you just know it. And Pauline knows it at this point. She's like starting to really try and see this as clearly as she can, but she's like, something's not quite sitting correctly. So, Pauline is continuing to live in her cottage in the weird world, the place where she's meant to be protected. Her mother lives not too far away. And Stan's around like 4-5 days a week. He's kind of always there. He's the life link between everything that's going on. He's always like, oh, it's okay. The government are watching us. Don't worry. There's no way the mafia is going to find us. No, we're so protected. No one's ever going to find us in this place. But the doubting thoughts in Pauline's head, they start to get louder and louder and louder. And so, what Pauline does next is great. I actually love what she does next. She decides to stage a sort of sting, if you will. Because by this point she's convinced she's being fed a load of lies. And she's like, okay, tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to figure this out. So, we're in 1993 at this point. This is 5 years after that meeting in the motel. She says, I was at war with myself and I wanted to find some definitive way to prove it right or wrong. So here's what she does. On a casual Tuesday evening at 8 o'clock, she phones her mother and she says, I've been broken into. I've come home and my house has been ransacked. People have been in this house and I don't know what to do. Because surely this must mean that someone from the mafia or someone has discovered where I live or something. So can you please help me? Our mum says, okay, let me go and speak to Stan about this. So the phone call ends. So now Pauline waits. She waits an hour. She waits 2 hours. Eventually her mum calls her back. And she says, okay, I've spoken to Stan. And he says that, yeah, 2 people have been picked up from just outside your house with some of your belongings. 2 men broke into your house. They took some of your things and they headed down the street with them. And Pauline says, when she said those words, I knew the whole thing was a hoax. The entire thing was a lie. There had been no break-in. Pauline had made the break-in up And now, here was her mother lying to her down the phone. Right, so by now she knows the story is bullshit. The doubts that Pauline had felt in the back of her head started to now be just real thoughts. She was 100% sure this was all a big lie. She says, that was the moment I knew all of the severed relationships in my life, all of the crazy running from place to place, all of the strangeness, it was a lie. It took a full week for Pauline to speak to her mum. She just couldn't quite get over the fact that her mum had called her back and said, oh yeah, there was 2 men caught outside your house with belongings, when she knew it wasn't true. She knew that was all a big lie. Eventually she plucks up the courage and she goes to her mum and she says, I know that this is not true. I know there's no mafia involvement. I don't know what weird fucking situation we are in, but I also know that there's a lot of lies being told here. And her mum is really horrified and upset. Not because she doesn't believe Pauline, but she doesn't like to hear the accusations about Stan. Ruth will try to defend Stan as much as she can. She will say, Stan has saved our family. He was the one who told me years ago that your father was in the mafia. He's the one who saved this family. He got us here. He's kept us all safe. And when her daughter doesn't believe it, Ruth takes that badly. She gets very, very upset about it. So Pauline, not finished with this, of course, goes to Stan. She goes directly to him. And she says, I know this is all bullshit. I know this is not true. None of this is true. And she says, my memory of that night is just how sad he was. In his eyes, I saw that he recognised I was no longer buying into it, and I was no longer one of them. Pauline went on to spend months trying to convince her mother that Stan was lying to them. But her mother, she just wouldn't have it. And sadly, they reached a standoff. Pauline says, I was furious and resentful, and I thought I hated Stan for a long time. Now, she went through a process here, Pauline, where she couldn't quite figure out, was her mother in on it? Were her and Stan working as a team? What the hell was actually just going on? Why was she living in this community? What was all of this mafia business that actually wasn't true? What was that? She says, I eventually decided my mother was not in on this. Stan was making all of this up. Every bit of it. But I just couldn't think why he would have done it. An answer to why Stan might have done it is that actually what he wanted was Ruth to himself. He'd fallen in love with Ruth years before. Ruth had also fallen in love with Stan, and she was in a marriage with a man who was an alcoholic. And so Stan had invented this entire thing. Stan had told her, your husband is part of the mafia. You need to keep moving. But wherever you go, I'll come with you. Then when Warren's alcoholism became really bad, Stan was like, okay, what you need to do is leave Warren, and then I'll take over the role of kind of father in this family. And Ruth believed it. She just believed it. She suddenly looked at her husband. Now, why she didn't go to her husband and say to him, are you part of the mafia? I have no idea. This poor man, poor Warren, he was never involved. He was not a part of this. He was just a businessman who, unfortunately, liked a lot of alcohol. He was never part of the mafia. But Stan had convinced Ruth that she'd married a monster who was lying to her. So Pauline leaves the weird world, the community, because what she now knows is no one is following her. It's all a lie. Her mother says to her as she leaves the community, you have to be careful. People are after you. And Pauline says, Mum, there's no more people after me than anyone else in the world, because it's just not true. For a long time, their relationship is strained. It's difficult. Pauline can't get her mum to understand that the mafia has never existed in their life. Stan has created this entire thing. But she doesn't get that. Ruth continued to live in the weird world, still believing everything Stan had told her. Right, so years later, Pauline saw her father. Now, this story from her father's perspective is really strange, because all that he knows is that his alcoholism got a little bit out of control and his wife and 2 kids left. He knows nothing about Stan's massive lie that he was ever connected to the mafia. He's completely unaware of this. And Pauline says that as an adult, so many times she wanted to tell her dad, this is why this all happened. This is why we had this life for years. But he was ill with emphysema. He tried to battle drinking, but he was drinking well into his 60s. And she never quite had the heart to tell him. She said, I thought it would just enrage him, and that wouldn't do any good. There was nothing to gain from ever telling him that that's what happened in this family. I just find that fucking insane. This poor man thinks that his wife left and took the kids because he was an alcoholic. And actually it's because someone else was telling her that he was a mafia boss. Oh. Pauline's relationship with her mother, it never really entirely recovered. It improved over time. But things were always tense. And they were tense because Ruth continued to believe the story that Stan had given her. She never stopped believing Stan's story. Even after his death, she still believed that her husband was a part of the mafia. She just wouldn't accept anyone saying to her this was entirely invented by Stan. She just couldn't. She just couldn't get her head around that. She didn't want to. One of the final things that Ruth said to Pauline was, "Oh, Polly, if you don't believe this, how you must have hated me my whole life." And Pauline said, "No, I didn't hate you. I've been really angry at you, but I do still love you." Pauline set out on a journey to try and understand what Stan's thinking had been. Why had they ended up in this position? What was going on? Now, obviously, that can only be diagnosed from a distance, but eventually a Harvard psychiatrist, once Pauline has explained the whole story, explains that he thinks that Stan suffers from a delusional disorder. A delusion where he himself actually believed what he was saying. So it's like a kind of weird, like, Stan wasn't trying to actually set out to be manipulative. He actually believed this in a bizarre way. Or maybe, at some point in the beginning of that, he knew it wasn't right. But over the years, what he'd done was he'd kind of talked himself into it being real. Which is sort of similar to what happened to her mum. So for Ruth, it was like, she just believed it. And she'd lived it for so long that she was never willing to unbelieve it. She just couldn't see that there was ever an alternative to it. Pauline says, "I feel very sad for my mother. She had such a difficult life and she was vulnerable to Stan. Mostly because he was gentle. He was a caring guy. It's too bad that he had this terrible delusion." And she ends by saying, "But I also feel sad for myself and my brother. Two little kids whose lives were hijacked." And so ends the story of Pauline Dakin. Okay, alright. Well, I hope you enjoyed that story. It's a bit of a weird one. It's really bizarre. Yeah, it took me a good few days to get my head round the story and kind of figure out what I thought everybody in the story was thinking and feeling. And I just had to really work my way around this one because it's very odd. Very fucking odd. Imagine just discovering your whole life has been a lie. It's just, it's insane. It's mad. Okay, well, I'm going to end this here. And I'm going to say, you know what I'm going to say, because I say it at the end of every episode. If you want to get in touch, please do. Go to the Facebook group if you're not a part of it. It is a wonderful community of people, and I swear it's not the Weird World community. It's not some sort of weird shit like that. It's just it's a group of just the most beautiful people who really care for each other and who really put themselves out there and who laugh and who support each other and celebrate each other. It's it's not like anything else I know group wise. So get involved. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. You'll find me, just type in Extraordinary Stories Podcast. If you want to email me, extraordinarystoriespodcast@gmail.com. And, as I always say, if you know a good story, a great story, an extraordinary story, get in touch. Okay? Goodbye.
It didn't affect me really one way or the other. I would imagine from the look on his face, let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over. Let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over.